I went to the main event today, and simultaneously there were like maybe three conversations around confidentiality, compliance, on-chain compliance. So it's like really the topic is getting more and more serious, right? So we call this panel to discuss. So basically, we have two speakers here. We have Stellar Development Foundation, Predicate, and the point is to discuss the vision for the confidentiality and compliance, like which side to approach this topic, where what should go first, what should go next, what's the vision, how it should work. So we, within a couple of minutes of this session, we will try to respond to some questions, at least start. And I will tell you, we are taking this as a confidential token association. We are taking this topic seriously. And I will tell you about one project that we are currently putting together. And everyone would be welcome to participate. So a little spoiler, but yeah, let's start.
Sure. Hey, I'm Tomer. I'm the Chief Product Officer at the Stellar Development Foundation, which is an organization that shepherds the Stellar Network and L1 blockchain. Been around since 2015, so kind of like a veteran in the scene, really focused on real-world assets and equitable access. And we're seeing kind of like this explosion of demand for privacy right now. So we're also members of the Confidential Token Association and very curious and excited to talk about privacy and confidentiality.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Khushi, and I lead business development at Predicate, where we build policy infrastructure for on-chain financial applications. And so we've worked with many privacy projects, including Alio, Aztec, Maiden, and we support them on compliance rules. So things like anti-money laundering checks, countering the financing of terrorism, and customer due diligence. And we support that all at the smart contract level in order to enable compliant on-chain privacy.
Great. So let's start. My first question would be, so could you give your perspective? How do you view this balance between confidentiality, compliance, auditability for designing the blockchains?
Sure. So I think the important thing to understand is there is no one size fits all. So, Stellar is an L1 blockchain. We have a lot of different use cases, a lot of different jurisdictions, a lot of users, a lot of different stakeholders, and different use cases have different privacy requirements. And so we are a strong believer that there's no one size fits all. And so we're from the network level, we're really building up the core infrastructure, like the cryptographic primitives, so that you can build whatever you want on Stellar. And then we're also collaborating with the various entities in the privacy space to build different solutions on top of that. And I think it's really important because things are moving so fast. Also, in terms of like the tech is evolving so fast that enshrining any specific protocol is not necessarily kind of like the way to go. And I will say this might be blasphemy because this is a confidential token association. I actually think that confidential tokens are a bad abstraction. I think that we need to kind of like decouple tokens from the various privacy constructions that you can build on top of them. And so I would be very happy to take, something like tokens, the standards move very slow and they're very stable. Something like privacy moves very fast. I want to make sure that we kind of like decouple the innovation of those.
Great. What about you?
That makes sense, and a very hot topic to bring up at this event. In terms of the question around confidentiality and how that evolves with compliance, I think they very much go hand in hand. I don't think it's one comes before the other. I think it's like Tomer was saying, like privacy moves very, very fast, and there's many different forms of privacy as well. There's full anonymity, there's confidentiality, there's partial confidentiality, and all of these have different relationships with compliance because there's different amounts of information that you have access to. And so compliance in the digital asset space is also something that's ever evolving. It's something we learn more about as regulation comes about, as we get more guidance, as different leaders in the industry implement best practices around compliance. So I think it's something that evolves over time. time. And as privacy evolves, you at the same time think about, okay, we have this new form of privacy. Now, how do we enable compliance? How do we ensure that this privacy is being used in the way that we want it to be used instead of for facilitating illicit activity? And so both completely evolve together. And I think we've seen huge improvements on both sides.
Okay. So when we talk about adoption, right? So there have been a lot of discussions around the blockchain adoption, but I think we have kind of passed this level of conversations. Now the adoption of the confidentiality, confidential tokens. So from your point of view, what are the biggest kind of blockers here in the adoption of the confidential tokens from the compliance point of view?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really great tech in the world of confidentiality and privacy. I think that ZK is in a really good place right now. Also, FHE and all these wonderful technologies are like coming into play. So there's a lot of work to do on the tech, but the core stuff is there. And so we really need to move away from just focusing on the tech and also focusing on building products, because I don't think we've seen enough good products in the space. Now, mind you, this kind of makes sense because until late last year, for a variety of reasons, it was very difficult to work on privacy. So if you are a US based company, you probably avoided doing privacy things until earlier this year. And so right now we do have kind of like a more convenient regulatory environment to work on privacy, and so we're seeing things come into fruition. But there's so many products that need to get built on kind of like the higher levels of the stack, right? And we need people to kind of like move away from this idea of like technical building blocks and into like the more kind of like operational ownership building blocks. And I think, predicate are fucking awesome, right? The fact that you actually
I
have
confirm.
the fact that you have companies that are willing to kind of like build on-chain products, willing to take ownership, willing to actually head compliance, like forward compliance head on, that is like amazing. And we need more players like that in the space. And we just need, like if you look at the type of products that the type of tech that exists, we have things like selective disclosure, for example, with view keys. This has existed in like Zcash since the beginning of their lifetime, and I still haven't seen like a really good product around doing selective disclosure. And we really need these type of products to start getting built.
I think that's an incredible response, honestly. Like
Mostly around Predicate.
Oh yeah. Predicate's the best, personally. No bias. But I do agree. Products are one of the most important things that we could use in this ecosystem, and one of the things we've struggled with for the longest time. Something that we've also seen on our end is understandability has been a really difficult problem to solve, and that's on every front, right? That's with users, that's with developers, it's with regulators. All of these parties are stakeholders in different ways. They care about different things, and understanding how privacy and compliance and blockchains work is a lot to comprehend. And I think, especially on the side of confidentiality, it's probably one of the biggest problems that we face, because we spend so much time debating on whether something should be confidential using zero knowledge proofs, whether it should be confidential using fully homomorphic encryption. Meanwhile, there's a whole set of people out there who are like, I have no idea what any of that stuff is. And so understandability is really tough. I think we're finally getting to the point of time where users and developers are starting to understand how blockchains work, or at least what they can be used to achieve. And we're also starting to see a little bit of progress there on the regulator front. But privacy is a new world of things to tackle. People are still trying to understand how privacy enhancing technologies work, how they can be applied, what it means. And decoupling the idea that privacy is this scary black box is a really, really big step that we need to get to from an educational perspective, and a big hurdle that we need to cross before we'll see like mainstream adoption of privacy and of compliant privacy.
I just want to add to that. I fully agree. Like we have companies showing up at our offices, big banks, Fortune 500 companies. They sit at the table. One of the first things they say is that they want privacy. And then as soon as we go like one step deeper into, okay, what does privacy mean to you? What are your like privacy requirements? Silence, right? It's like, oh, privacy. So, and like privacy is such a complicated topic, and it has like all these different facets. So yeah, totally agree.
Thank you. Yeah, question to Tomer. So you have been pushing a lot on confidentiality recently. You've done a couple of announcements in October, right, during your event. Yeah, feel free to share more about those announcements. Maybe people here they are not yet aware. In terms of the design choices, design patterns, what would be like the most promising for meeting the compliance standards and confidentiality, like this balance that we are trying to keep?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that's important to realize about compliance is that we don't actually know what is compliant because the regulator hasn't actually told us what's compliant, right? And so we're doing a lot of guesswork. But like if we take it one step back, then what we announce is that we're launching a bunch of cryptographic building blocks. So we're right now launching Protocol 25 of Stellar, Protocol X-Ray, which is really focused on building blocks for privacy. So we have like pairing-friendly elliptic curves. We have we have ZK-friendly hash functions, Poseidon, and so we're putting the building blocks in place. We're also working with like abstraction layers like Noirlang on bringing Noir, which is kind of like a more user-friendly or developer-friendly DSL. We're working with Risk Zero on bringing the Risk Zero verifier. And we were also directly working on bringing privacy solutions. So together with Nethermind, some of the folks are here. We're building a private payments protocol based on like the privacy pools paper by Vitalik et al. A few years ago. And we're also working on internally on a confidential tokens implementation that kind of like closely follows the standard that you've been working on at the Confidential Token Association. And I will say, look, we don't, from a like a technical perspective, we're kind of like thinking about this from like first principles, and we're looking at bringing in as many potential or optional configurable building blocks so that eventually we can start mapping this into compliance. And these are things like selective disclosure with view keys. These are things like permissioned auditors. These are things like verified credentials, which we're very excited about, but are kind of like a bit further in the distance because of the regulatory environment.
Okay, great. Maybe a question to Khushi. On-chain compliance, right? So you focus on programmable rules, right, and policy frameworks for on-chain compliance. Question is, what's the approach for reaching on-chain compliance from your point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Tomer mentioned, we don't know what compliant looks like today. The best thing we can do is try our best and implement best practices as they are. But in terms of the way that Predicate is approaching this, there's two main things that we offer today. And so the first is our application compliance, which basically allows you to take existing on and off chain data providers, set policies, which are rules for what types of users can interact with your application, and then we issue a temporary cryptographic attestation that allows you to verify those rules on chain. And so the primary benefit of having a system built this way is that you can have application level rules and policies, and then you can also ensure that they're enforced on the smart contract, which before Predicate was actually not possible unless you built it all in house. Because what users could do is bypass the application that you've built and interact directly with the blockchain, which is an open and permissionless system. So in order for us to enable compliance on the blockchain, you need to have that two-step verification process, where at the application level, you check if a user meets the rules that are within your risk threshold, and at the smart contract, you verify those rules. This year, we've actually expanded on that and built another product for asset compliance, which allows you to automatically add certain wallet addresses to an asset blacklist, put in place transfer restrictions using high-risk addresses, so preventing the transfer of any assets to a high-risk address, and then also setting up address pauses, which allows you as an asset issuer to conduct investigations into those addresses. So now we have two forms of on-chain compliance. One is done at the asset level, and the other is done at the application level. And so those allow you to build this like strong, secure, and robust compliance system for on-chain financial products.
Great. Maybe let's talk. So we had a panel just before on the use cases, right? So Nicola spoke about different use cases that are unlocked by confidentiality, on-chain confidentiality. So from the compliance point of view, right? Which use cases do you think are the most promising, are the most like mature, and for which use cases it's a bit too early to even talk about it?
Sure. I think that first of all, obviously there's a spectrum of like confidentiality and privacy, whether you have anonymity or you don't have anonymity. I think that right now, most of the solutions we're seeing in the space is on the confidential but not private space, which are a great fit for, payroll, maybe merchant payments, B2B payments for sure. And so kind of like and these are the type of institutions that we're seeing operating on Stellar right now, and they're asking for this. I'm a strong believer in payroll. I think that payroll might be kind of like the next big kind of like wave of adoption, which will eventually be kind of like a force multiplier if you introduce kind of like merchant payments on the other end, because the most kind of like interesting explosion in usage happens when you have like intersecting use cases. And so I think payroll and merchant payments are probably in that intersection. But I do think that enterprises are key for adoption, and I think that if you look if you look at the current space of privacy solutions, they're really geared towards peer-to-peer payments, um, which is great. And I think there's a lot of cypherpunks that get really excited about this. Is this what's going to lead for like an explosion of adoption of like blockchain and privacy and blockchain? I don't think so. I think it's the enterprise use cases.
That's amazing. I mean, I think my number one is probably very similar, which is payments. Payments are absolutely the basis for everything we do on chain, and so privacy and peer-to-peer payments is the baseline. But I think my second option, the second thing that I'm most excited about would probably be private DeFi and also private custody of assets, like something as simple as trading, holding an asset. If you have any kind of capital on chain, you want to ensure that other people can't see that because that is your own proprietary information and data of what you're holding and what you're trading and how you're trading that. And so I think all of that is built on top of payments, but private DeFi is going to be very powerful. And there's a lot that you can do with private DeFi. It allows these institutions to actually engage with financial products on chain, which today is very hard to do. And then the last one, and this one's more on the technical side, is getting rid of MEV. I think it's a very controversial topic. Some people think there's good MEV, bad MEV. MEV should exist. It's a part of how blockchains work. But I do think that privacy and getting rid of MEV is part of making it easier to transact on chain, making it easier to understand what type of pricing you're going to receive on chain. And that is truly the basis for any kind of stable financial system. So I do think privacy and the elimination of MEV as it relates to DeFi and payments, it all goes hand in hand, but all of it is very exciting.
Can I disagree
Of
on one
course.
thing? I think like the private DeFi stuff sounds very sexy. I think I haven't seen any really great projects in the space yet, and I think one of the problem is when you generalize things as DeFi, you're kind of like seeking for like the holy grail of like a fully private compute environment. And there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in that space. I wouldn't call this production grade quite yet. And so I would love to see private DeFi, and specifically like trading. I think that central limit order books that are private are like good enough and will take us a long way. But private DeFi, I think people hear that and they try to prototype these things, and it's a pain in the butt. Like it's really difficult.
I agree. I don't think I've seen any private DeFi that is enterprise grade. But one of the things that I actually really caution with private DeFi, a lot of people think the goal of private DeFi is like, let's completely obfuscate the system and the trading and make it so that no one knows what you're trading and you have all the alpha. But it's not really about that. It's more about like making sure you're transacting in a secure way that is not fully transparent, right? Like a lot of enterprises and institutions still care about who their counterparty is. And so even if you have private DeFi, if I don't know that the counterparty I'm transacting with is someone safe, secure, and someone I'm willing to transact with, I can't use that application. And so private DeFi is sexy and cool, and I think will be awesome. But there's a lot of really big and open compliance questions on how to make that even possible for an enterprise to use.
Last question, not the easiest one, but really good to know your like vision. How do you see regulation evolving in the next coming years? Like what could be the potential directions?
I would say, first of all, we're lucky enough to be in a space right now where I wouldn't wait on regulation. Like I would, try to build from the ground up with like sensible, illicit guards, illicit finance guards. I think that um, like you can use the current frameworks for compliance that we have. You can use permissioned auditors, which is, like in the space, I think the cyberpunks are not really happy about this, but you can use permission auditors in space as long as you're being very explicit about this. Okay. If I'm transacting on a payments pool that Predicate has like, some super auditor power on it, that's cool as long as that is kind of like front and center and disclosed. And so I would say, first of all, don't wait for the regulator. Like we're good to go. Build. Don't wait for the perfect tech. Don't wait for the perfect regulation. Just build. The tech will get better. I think from a regulation perspective, the big thing that we need, especially in the States, is getting verified credentials, like acknowledged for financial transactions. Because right now we have like really great verified credentials tech. For example, you can go on like your Google Wallet and prove in California that you're above 18, for example. But what is this used by? I think Bumble is like the only service that uses it because you can't actually use this on with financial institutions. And so verified credentials and getting rid of like the current interpretation of like the Bank Secrecy Act that entails people hoarding on KYC information that is completely unnecessary, that constantly leads to leaks, constantly leads to hacks. We need like really strong counter regulation on that.
Yeah. Big plus one on the Bank Secrecy Act point. We're in a very lucky position today that we've already seen regulation passed in the United States and guidance all over the world in many huge financial centers on how to interact with digital assets. I think there's a lot of ways that regulation can go. I know there's a lot of financial services authorities that are focused on DeFi and how we can build safe and compliant DeFi, which I think will be huge because it'll legitimize a lot of what we're working on in the decentralized finance space. But I also do think that regulation is a slow moving process and it's an ever changing process too. I think what's really important is to build regulation, define regulation in terms of the technology itself. Like we want to make sure this regulation isn't suppressing the technology that we're building, but instead making space for it. And I think that's really important. And we saw that with passage of the Genius Act. We see that with the regulators that are trying to work with decentralized finance. And as long as we keep doing educational sessions, workshops, making sure that everyone knows how privacy works, how compliance works, how decentralized finance works, that's how we build regulation that actually makes space for this technology as opposed to just trying to control it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.